drink champagne, some die of thirst. No way of knowing which way it's going. Hope for the best, expect the worst. Hope for the best.
Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. We made it. It's Tuesday, October 1st, 2024. 34 days until the election. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
Washington commentary columnist and director of domestic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And the author of The Extinction of Experience Being Human in a Disembodied World, and our media commentary columnist, Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
So the Israelis are moving into Lebanon. The Israeli armed forces have informed the rather scant Lebanese population in the area, the 18-mile area between the border of Israel and the Litani River, to move north of the Litani River. In fact, to move 36 miles north would be the wise move to another river, the name of which eludes me at the moment. And let's just go right into it. Israel is crushing Hezbollah and seeking to destroy Hezbollah, an enemy of the United States, a murderer of hundreds of Americans. And not only did the United States attempt to prevent Israel from taking on Hezbollah, not only did it take 24 hours for the United States to welcome the death of Hassan Nasrallah, but yesterday Joe Biden went to a microphone and said, we need a ceasefire now. While Israel has Hezbollah on the run, while its purpose now is to destroy Hezbollah's rocket launchers and missiles and things, and seems to have an open shot at doing so, with the incapacitation of thousands of Hezbollah fighters and the decapitation of its leadership, and the United States is calling for a ceasefire. Am I taking crazy pills, Matt Continetti?
I think actually you may be taking crazy pills. Maybe that's what explains the crushing morosity on this podcast for all these years. Maybe there's been a secret drawer somewhere in the commentary offices where you've been hiding these crazy pills. No, I mean, you're not taking crazy pills. Biden is completely out to lunch. I mean, we've seen that in the past few days with his response to Hurricane Helene, with his response to the question, what does he think about the strike against Yemen, or against the Houthis? And he responded by saying, well, I hope we need it, the two sides come to an agreement, referring to the dock workers who are now on strike, actually, that no agreement happened. One more failed Biden prediction. And now we see it with his continuing demand for a ceasefire in the north between parties that he cannot name, in the south between interlocutors that have no real, I mean, it's unclear who would negotiate on behalf of Hamas, since Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas and the architect of October 7th, apparently hasn't been heard from for weeks. So he's completely out of it. What's interesting to me is in the past 24 hours, I've received a flurry of official statements and readouts from the Defense Department. And in those statements, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is sending so many different mixed messages. Like, he's talking to the Israelis and he gets off the phone and he says, we're completely behind Israel in its defense and in its necessity to go in and clear out these spider holes and tunnels and other installations where Hezbollah has been firing rockets into northern Israel. But we also need a ceasefire, and we're trying to send in more forces into the region, but escalation would be a mistake. So those leave me confused. And then just finally, I think we just have to look at the difference in response between the United States and Israel vis-a-vis the Houthis. The Houthis have been disrupting international trade in the Red Sea for almost a year now. They have been firing on civilian vessels indiscriminately. They have attacked our forces. And we have done little in what has been the most sustained U.S. naval operation since the Second World War. Whereas the two times where the Houthis have launched an attack on Israel, Israel has responded by blowing up ports. Massive retaliation. And the juxtaposition of the images of a United States which kind of just sits there and takes it from this ragtag militia funded directly by Iran. There's no mystery where its money comes from, which has had a completely outsized effect on the global economy and international security. And Israel, which actually stands up for itself, is and understands that sometimes you need to take action in order to reestablish deterrence, is just a stunning juxtaposition, and I think a real indictment of the United States under this administration.
Can we just spend a minute talking about the tone of Biden's remarks in the last 24 to 48 hours? Because he's become very angry and defensive in a way that I think the people who work for him have tried to protect the public and the press from seeing. But when he was asked, Matt's exactly right. When he was asked about if he was aware of and comfortable with Israel's plans, he said, "I'm more aware than you might know. I'm comfortable with them stopping." I mean, everything about what he's saying, it takes like a Potemkin village to keep this guy propped up at this point. We have these pictures of him sitting in a blank Resolute desk, with a screen, supposedly dealing with FEMA. I mean, no one believes it anymore, but there's several months still left in his term, which is a long time in terms of international relations. So perhaps all the briefings from Austin are a way to distract from the fact that whenever Joe Biden opens his mouth about national affairs now, it's confusing or misguided or angry, and that's not good for whatever it is the administration thinks it's doing.
Christine brings up a really good point, because when I saw Biden's appearance, my first thought was, how's this guy going to make it to January? That's we've been saying it since he stepped aside from running. We've been saying, well, then how can he actually continue to serve as president? It's becoming a bigger and bigger problem. His absence, both in terms of what's happening with Israel and in terms of the hurricane here, and a whole array of domestic issues, is extraordinary. And Kamala's off campaigning, obviously.
Okay, I got a theory. Well, this just came to me. But it's rich and it's thick, and you know what? It's so, on the one hand, science fictional, and on the other hand, so absolutely logical that I think it could happen. And it just occurred to me as you were talking, Abe. November 5th, election happens. Harris loses. Biden resigns. Harris becomes president for the last 2 months of his term. First Black woman president. She'll be president. She'll be the 47th president of the United States. Right there. Seems perfectly logical to me. So she'll get
Trump will have to get a whole new set of hats.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's the problem.
That will make him 48.
That'll be 48. I know, but yeah. So there's a merch. Wait a minute. That'll be valuable merch.
Yeah,
it's like having the Honus Wagner upside down baseball card to have the wrong numeral for Trump's.
And all the Trump 47 T-shirts will be on like kids in Africa wearing the wrong Super Bowl team shirts.
Exactly. My grandfather used to sell surplus Army Navy gear, and it was always the stuff that the Army and Navy, like when they made jackets and added extra buttons, or they didn't, like the stuff they didn't want to give to actual soldiers and sailors. This is a version. This could well be a version of that. Although knowing Trump, he would probably sell it at a premium and not give it away to starving kids in Africa. And maybe he could sell it for $300, like his watch.
But this would never happen if you believe some of the so the Biden people are now leaking to the press, not just about Israel's war plans, which of course, thanks a lot, Biden administration. but leaking about how upset Biden still is about the fact that he got shoved aside so quickly. So NBC News has this extremely interestingly snarky story. Sorry to bring us from, high values down to snark. But what's interesting to me about this story, which says, he has such mixed feelings about this, he can't believe they've all moved on, et cetera, is that the only positive statements about Harris that he supposedly had people say come from unnamed campaign officials on her campaign. It's like, oh no, he really wants her to win. Meanwhile, his people are speaking directly to this reporter saying he feels left behind. Obviously, we've seen him express some frustration and anger and confusion. And I'm not so sure he would. It would be an interesting scenario, but I think that guy's clinging to power till the very last moment.
Fair enough. I'm just saying you could do it. You could see it. He could say that I'm responsible for the, or she could invoke the 25th Amendment is the other thing. Once the election is over, and, he says 2 or 3 more things like, I really look forward to the collective bargaining, solving the problem of strikes against Yemen. I mean, he said that on the tarmac on Sunday. He said the president of the United States confused the dock workers strike with the Houthi, with Yemen. And it's only getting worse, right? Is the point. Like, this
Right.
he is in a degenerating condition.
So
the question is the speed of the degeneration.
This is maybe a good segue to the other milestone today, which is former President Jimmy Carter is marking his centennial today. He turns 100 years old. He's been in hospice care in Plains, Georgia for over a year now, 19 months. And people are marking this occasion by talking about Carter and his legacy. And my theory has always been is that Carter is trying to outlast Biden. And that's why he's holding on.
Well, by the way, he's still eligible to run.
That's true. That's true. Only one term. That's right. He could be like Trump. I have another theory.
Yes.
I have the Green Mile theory. I'm now going to be disrespectful of a 100-year-old man. So just get ready. I'm not talking about how wonderful he was and he built houses and he had a good deregulatory program and all of that. He's the worst president of my lifetime. And I think that it's a little like the movie The Green Mile, which is based on a Stephen King story, in which a man who does something unjust puts a prison official who puts to death somebody he knows to be innocent and knows to be some kind of a servant of God, nonetheless does perform the execution. And the punishment that he faces is a life lived way longer than he would wish it to, so that he sees everybody he loves die over and over. He's in his 120s, 130s. How about this as a scenario? God is keeping Carter alive so that he can see Trump elected to another term. This is the reverse image of Matt's idea here, which is that Carter is keeping himself alive so that he can watch Biden lose. And I'm saying God is keeping Biden alive so he can see Trump win, so that the final stake in his coffin, or final stake, the final nail is put in his coffin. And the reason I say this is everyone's today going to talk about this and that. And he's the first president born in a hospital. And he was this a modest man. He lived in Plains. He taught Sunday school. He was so this, he was so that. Carter was the first open anti-Semite president. Carter blamed the Jews for his defeat in 1980. All this talk about how Trump said this terrible thing about how, Jews would have a lot to do with his defeat if he lost. Carter believed that about his defeat in 1980. Carter is one of the authors of the idea that Israel is an apartheid state. Carter's behavior toward Israel, and I think secondarily toward the Jewish people, has been disgusting and disgraceful. And I hope he enjoys his cake, and that and that he lives as long as God wishes him to live. But I am not celebrating him, and I am not going to sit here and allow this day to go by simply as a day of celebration. He has been an enemy of my people and an enemy of the Jewish state. And I like the fact that he's watching Israel roll up Hezbollah. How about that?
According
He's
to
been
the
a great
Green Mile
coddler
theory.
of terrorism. That's the key thing. I mean, and in seeing the Biden approach to Israel and terrorism completely upended, it's a reminder of the long democratic delusions, long running democratic delusions about Israel and making peace with terrorists.
I was just going to
And we
say,
talk
according
about
to the
Carter's
Green
other- I'm
Mile
sorry.
theory, he's lived long enough now to see Nasrallah killed and Ismail Haniyeh, who are his friends that are left now.
I mean, look, you remember that he also had this bizarre predilection. He liked to be one of those guys like Jesse Jackson, who had a kind of independent post-presidential foreign policy in which he would go around and kind of semi-negotiate with the world's bad actors. And one of his gambits was to talk about how beautiful the wives of these evil dictators were. Do you remember, like, the slim and lovely wife of Hafez al-Assad? Slim and love because he was supposedly trying to negotiate the release of hostages or something like that. He did this. He also did this with Kim Jong-il, I believe. He had this propensity that predates Trump for buttering up and saying nice, soothing nostrum and nosegays, for terrible people and terrible actors while abusing the Jewish state. So, not to mention
Jamie Kirchick
what
wrote
an
a piece-
awful president he was. I mean,
Jamie Kirchick wrote a piece years ago about his responsibility for Zimbabwe too, right?
right. So not only, and I mean, he was really like what we are talking about here in terms of Biden and what Matt just said about the Houthis and all this. The American tradition, this kind of two-track tradition where we became sort of activist with our military force and power, starting gingerly after Vietnam in the early 1980s with the Expeditionary Force to Grenada, our successful efforts to overthrow Noriega in Panama, then going on with the Gulf War and all of that, all of which came to a screeching halt after the difficulties in Iraq, the election of Obama, and all of that. But this idea that martial power is not an effective way to project American authority. In fact, it may be worse. It may make things worse. And our ideological priors about how to talk about our adversaries are making things worse and all of that. That all had its origins in the Carter administration. And it is very young officials from the Carter administration who are sort of back, now. Not quite. I mean, they're a little too old, but there are still people who sort of like came to their political majority or, were in graduate school or whatever during the Carter years who are still living and breathing that mindset, including Barack Obama. Barack Obama's my age. I was 16 years old or when Carter became president and, 20 when he left the presidency, and Obama's about the same age. And I went one way in relation to the way Carter thought about American power and the projection of American power, and Obama went the other. And that's what was like to be, a late baby boomer. And the entire Democratic warfighting military establishment really remains in a kind of Carterite mindset here. I mean, they do something, but not much. Don't go too far. Don't win wars.
Just historically, it's worth noting, after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, Carter began slightly turning a little bit more hawkish and began the process of putting the intermediate range nuclear missiles into Europe. His Pentagon began looking at some of the high-tech programs that would eventually culminate with the Gulf War, qualitative edge, GPS, and stealth technologies, for example. And so there was a moment there where maybe reality kind of mugged him. But after he lost to Reagan, that's when the Democrats said, well, enough with that. And they embraced everything that was opposed to Reagan, including the nuclear freeze, including trying to stop the defense buildup. So there was a brief moment where, maybe Carter and the Democrats could get serious about the Cold War, but then that vanished as soon as Reagan became president. And now there's this weird kind of revival of an old trope that Reagan won the presidency via skullduggery, with Iran and the hostages. And this myth pops up every now and then. And as part of this long goodbye that Jimmy Carter has been sending to the American people, we have it again. So Carter revisionism should be opposed.
Yeah, so
its
that's
first
the original
sign.
That's the original October surprise. It's now October. We're going to be hearing about the possibility of an October surprise throughout the month of October. That's a blow that uniquely affects one candidate against another. The ultimate October surprise, of course, being the reopening of the Hillary investigation by James Comey, followed because it did not end up with him losing the presidency, with the Bush DUI revelation 5 days before the election in the year 2000. But the term was devised for this idea that there had been secret negotiations between the Reagan camp and Iran saying, don't let the hostages come home until we win, which was being retailed by a guy named Gary Sick. And it does keep coming up, and it keeps coming up, and it keeps coming up. And first of all, Carter lost 40 states. That's not because of any October surprise. He lost 40 states because the American people had had enough of him. They had had enough of him. It was the biggest landslide loss after a first term in American history. Nothing like it ever before. Probably there will be nothing like it since. And he was somebody who, and this gets to the Israel point. So he's sitting around saying, Israel is so terrible. He sent an expeditionary force into the into the desert to try to figure out how to rescue the hostages. Desert One, the helicopter crashed. It was a huge disaster and a major embarrassment for the United States. A year later, almost to the day, Israel, tiny little country with not much of an air force, flies a plane to Iraq and destroys the nascent Iraqi nuclear reactor in a successful, like gonzo mission that they did not have that much hope of success with, and they succeeded nonetheless. And talk about the shaming of Jimmy Carter in a way that we don't even begin to understand. I think it wasn't just, Israel somehow didn't give him enough credit for Camp David, or Jews in America turned on him because he supported Andrew Young, the UN ambassador who was very hostile to Israel in 1970. That sort of forced Young's ouster, and he blamed the Jews for that in some fashion. I think it was the success of the Osirak strike as against the incredible humiliation of the Desert One catastrophe that solidified in his head some weird connection between his failure and Israel's illegitimate and illicit successes on the planet Earth, so that he lived through this weekend and lived through the last 2 weeks. That might be the Green Mile. I mean, that might be the Green Mile moment. It won't have to wait until for Trump to win, because of course Trump might not win. But
can I say something else on that subject, because that's an important part of Carter's legacy, which is that if you read Reagan's diaries, everybody knows that Reagan was upset at the Osirak strike because he didn't know about it, and it turned out that the Carter team knew that these plans were in production. They knew that this was something Israel might do, and they knew a certain amount of how it might happen, and they simply didn't brief the Reagan team. So he was also responsible for an immediate fight between Reagan and Menachem Begin and setting off that relationship on those terms. Now, the Reagan administration turned around the U.S.-Israel relationship in important ways, but Carter, it had to overcome Carter's sabotage, which is really what we should call it at the beginning. And that sort of set the stage for this idea that every time Israel carried out a strike or did something in its self-defense, it was bringing on the apocalypse. It started with Carter's lying about or lying by omission about the OC rocket attack. It continued through Lebanon and all that. And Reagan's advisors were very much in that same mold of mind that Carter was, that, the Israelis were going to eventually set off, the end of the world sort of thing. And Reagan personally was the reason that it didn't hold.
Abe, let me ask you a question. Biden said, I know a lot more than they think I know, and they should need to stop and all of that. And yet we know that Israel didn't tell them about the strike or whatever it is. Like, why does he care? Why does Biden care? Why did Reagan care? Why do they care? Now, I understand the idea that in 1981, the world is a tinderbox. Reagan is the Soviet Union also has nuclear weapons and all of that stuff, right? So we're, the world is bipolar, and we're in this, not bipolar like a medical condition, and we need to sort of America needs perfect knowledge to deal with the nature of the threats all over the world posed by this one, bad actor. Israel's like, we're doing you a solid not telling you. Like, why would we? You don't want us to do it. We need to do it. We've been having arguments about where to go. You've told us, don't go into Lebanon. You've told us, don't go into Rafah. We're a sovereign nation. We cannot even understand why you'd be mad that we did it, even because you think it's a bad idea. Although in the end, it's really, who's it a bad idea for? It's a bad idea for Israel, right? I mean, it's not a bad idea how is it a bad idea for America exactly? Never made clear how, let's say, Israel defeating Hamas in Gaza poses a threat or a risk to the United States.
But that's not what the administration says. They say
Right.
it's bad for the suffering Palestinian people or the suffering
But not
Lebanese
Lebanon.
people. But
Right. Okay.
Whoever is Israel's enemy,
Right.
if it's bad for them, it shouldn't be done.
Okay, so let's take.
But I think, by the way,
go ahead.
I think the reason at this point Biden cares is because he's been so left out of what's happening on the ground. I mean, the events have completely gotten out of his grasp, if they were ever in his grasp, and he's been disproven. The endless BS. We're going to negotiate with Hamas to get to come to an agreement and to get the hostages back. That's just been it's gone on so long. It's a farce. And Israel has, in defying the Washington explicitly, achieved something remarkable. So Biden's just burned. By the way, this is also a Democratic tradition of sort of this feeling burned by Israel. Obama had it. We're talking about Carter having it. There's like a one-upsmanship or a sense of I don't know. Like there's
Israel acts.
Yeah,
It's a classic. I think it is a classic problem of human nature, which is that people who are torn and find it very hard to move because they are paralyzed by the possibilities, the negative possibilities that are ahead of them. And so they understand some of the positives, they look at the negatives, and they kind of freeze in place. And then you have some extremely confident person or something like that who's like, okay, I'm just going to barrel ahead, right? And you say, that guy is so reckless, like it's Iceman, you're reckless. You're reckless, Maverick. I don't trust you. You're reckless and dangerous and you're all that, right? And then Maverick wins the Top Gun war, right? And is Iceman then okay? In the movie, Iceman gives him a hug on the aircraft carrier. In real life, you're like, you know what? Right now, this looks good, but let's see where we are in 4 years, and then you're going to see how bad it is because you're being shamed by somebody's action. You are shamed.
Totally inappropriate sense of competition between these Democratic presidents and Israeli leaders in times of crisis.
I think that's a very, I think it's a really interesting point. You know what Bibi should do? Bibi should call Biden and say, Joe, take the win.
Right?
Take the win. We got Nasrallah. We're taking out Hezbollah. Take the win.
Except he should say it about the dock workers strike. Joe, accept the terms. Take the win.
The dock worker strike is interesting. I haven't, barely been following this because, who follows it really? But you notice the terms of the dock worker strike? Like what we're talking about here? We're talking about they're going out on strike because a raise of 50% is not enough for them. They want 60% and they want 6 weeks off and they want a pony and I don't know what else.
77%.
Now they want 77%. They were offered
the latest
50.
I'm seeing
It went
is
up to
77%
60.
over 6 years. Yeah.
Right.
But
And it
this
went
is
up to
like
60. Okay.
But this is like when public sector unions, teachers unions, police unions start, when their terms are actually made public. It's why the American people should follow what happens when these larger strikes occur. There's also, by the way, the National Symphony Orchestra is on strike too here in DC. I just want to add to the list of strikers.
Oh, that's good.
People
Because a
should-
lot of people love to go to the it's not like the classical music sector of the economy isn't in the death
No, but-
throes.
But notice how the Democratic Party in particular, which is heavily dependent on union contributions. I mean, the teachers unions fund the Democratic Party every 4 years in every 2 years, really, in elections. People don't realize that rhetoric still has a resonance, I think, with the average American who isn't a member of a union. They say, oh, yeah, these are hardworking, working people. They need someone to represent their interests. Then when they look at the terms, they're sort of horrified because they're not making that much money in the private sector. And if they made those demands, they'd be instantly, fired and replaced with someone who wasn't making insane demands. So it's also costing a lot of money in the pensions. And I mean, there are downstream financial effects for all of these unions.
I just think this is another example of bad news for Harris. You have a situation abroad that is out of the White House's control, even though we're very happy about what Israel is doing. From their perspective, they've totally lost control over Israel and events. You have the hurricane cutting a path of devastation throughout the Southeast, and Harris scrambling to look as if she's in command of FEMA and she's compassionate toward the victims. Now you have this dock workers strike taking place in an election where Harris's opponent has displayed extraordinary support among labor, whether it's the Teamsters not endorsing any candidate for the first time in decades, polls showing Trump outperforming Republicans among labor voters, outperforming previous Republican nominees among labor voters, and Harris with one of the smallest margins among labor voters of any Democratic nominee in decades. Another NBC poll out earlier this week showing that the Democratic margin among Hispanic voters, again, is shrinking precipitously. I know that she's ahead in the averages of the national polls, but I think that events have kind of turned away from her in recent days. And I'm, of course, the wheel always turns. Something might happen. There's still, as we say, 40 some days, but I don't think it's been a very good news week for her. And that is the lead into tonight's vice presidential debate, where I would say Democrats are doing a pretty good job of setting expectations so low for Tim Walz. I mean, beyond setting the bar low.
I'm doing prayer hands right now. I'm doing the prayer
They're
hands.
leaking stories that he's got he's nervous. They're saying he's never been a very good debater. There's saying that they're all petrified that he could really screw up. I don't know how confident I am in his abilities, for the simple reason that he doesn't have a candidate that he can attach himself to. He doesn't have a candidate who has a firm worldview that he can promote in this debate. He doesn't have a candidate with any strong positions that he can.
cares about you. So I have
He's
been
just gonna
watching.
say it.
Okay, so Harris has $570 trillion in the bank.
Right.
So if you watch CNN, if you watch MSNBC, if you watch local news here, even here in New York, which has absolutely no reason to advertise on local news in New York because, she's going to win New York. So you see these ads, and it is this: Kamala Harris is for you, and Donald Trump is for rich people.
Right.
And he's trying to stay out of jail. This is the entirety of the message. She is for
crazy.
you, and he is for rich people. Okay. Now, boils down to the classic Republican Democratic populist split, right? Republicans claim they're for everybody, but they're really not, and we are, and we're for you, and all. And that message, I think, broadly speaking, works in some fundamental sense as a kind of, when you ask those questions of who cares about somebody like you, if you spend $200 million saying Kamala Harris cares about you, when they ask this question in polling, you're probably going to say Kamala Harris cares about me more than you're going to say Kamala Harris doesn't care about me. But what else is there to say about her?
There's going to be a contrast visually between Vance and Walz tonight. I mean, Vance is what, 20 years younger, and Harris's campaign is the new way forward. We need a new generation of leadership, but she and Walz are about the same age. Walz reads actually much older than her, and
Just because he has gray hair.
Right, but it's also like he seems like an insane, he seems like someone's crazy aging boomer uncle, like with his gestures. I mean, I think that's going to be the real challenge for him is not speaking with his hands too much. But he also, he's very ambitious. And so Mark Leibovich at the New Yorker has done a profile of him. And in there you see this guy thinks of himself as a future presidential candidate. Now he's tamped that down and become the assistant coach again. But we shouldn't underestimate his ambition. And but the interesting thing is always to watch him when he's with Harris on the trail. Like clearly it's taking every ounce of self-discipline, not, to play the role that he's been given in this particular election, but that's not really him. So again, just like her, there's an inauthenticity problem, and we'll see if that plays out tonight over the course of an hour.
However,
Also, the
JD
confidence
Vance,
is also about
yeah.
The confidence is not just about Tim Walz, though, in terms of setting expectations. That's in contrast with the confidence crisis that Kamala herself is going through, because they pulled Tim Walz essentially off the campaign trail or limited his campaign stops and his speeches for that reason, or reportedly for that reason, that he is better than she is live, and also that they're worried that if he's too good and he drums up too much enthusiasm, then it's a contrast with the fact that although people are coming out to her rallies and speeches, it doesn't have the joy vibe, because she's not a joyous person. She's a very self-serious person who walks out on the stage and says, joy. And he's a guy who
She
dances
smiles
around
when
the
she
stage.
says joy.
By-
I don't
by the
know.
way-
she's always
but he is
laughing
very
at herself.
But he is very
Can I
bouncy.
correct something, by the way? If you want to read the
Yes.
Leibovich profile, it's in the Atlantic. Sorry, not the New
Okay,
Yorker.
yes.
601.
But
half
he is
dozen the other,
very
but-
he's very, very bouncy. He's bouncy, and he's he's like Santa
it's
Claus
the leg
without
kicks.
a beard.
What's this? The leg kick.
Yeah,
I don't know
right.
what that is.
He's
Right.
not,
But-
he's not going to talk with his hands tonight, though. I mean, don't
No,
you think he'll be?
but
Yeah,
he'll be
serious.
at a podium. But
Yeah.
but it is also must be said that Vance is the least popular candidate for national office that we have ever seen, according to Harry Enton, our friend at CNN. Nobody has had bad numbers like this ever, practically, in running for office. He has done it to himself. Did it to himself from the very beginning, or didn't do it, like, the recollection of things that he had said and done, the crazy cat lady stuff and the kind of attacking women who don't have children stuff and all of that the Harris campaign and the media have been very expert at retailing and making sure you don't forget. But he's just not a very attractive candidate. And so on the one hand, expectations are very low for him because people don't like him. If he can somehow alter that tonight, he's got an easier job than Walz in that sense, unless it is impossible for him to do so, unless his unattractive qualities are actually so ingrained in him that he will just come across as unattractive because he's unattractive.
I don't think he views his job tonight as rehabilitating his reputation. That might be down the road. I think he views his job as landing as many blows as possible on Harris's candidacy, for the simple reason that his boss did not land many blows during their debate. And it's a weird moment because typically the vice presidential debate is sandwiched in between the multiple presidential debates. And in this case, it's like the, after dinner mint or something, because we did have multiple presidential debates, but they were with different Democratic nominees, and
it's like the dregs of the wine. It's like
you're kind of twirling your
pouring
glass,
out the last of the bottle.
Yeah. And so it's kind of this
stuff had little pieces of cork in it.
I just feel it's kind of, it's kind of irrelevant. I just, no one really, as Trump has said, no one really votes on the basis of vice president.
Well,
and there's not going to be another presidential debate. At least there's not one scheduled. And I seriously doubt there will be another one. And the race is tied. So I guess we're just going to tune in and hope, someone kind of combusts on stage, and that will make it interesting.
You know what's amazing about the Democratic ticket? We're no longer even saying at some point she's going to have to face tough questions about why she changed.
That's true. We did that for about a month or two, and we stopped.
Abe always said she wasn't.
We've been demoralized.
Abe wins.
Yeah, but like I do. I win because
you win.
This is it. She never had to do it. She did her round of softball interviews.
I know.
She did the debate.
A round two is a round.
three of them.
Three
is a round. Okay.
And that was and now it's like they're just going with this candidacy is an idea. It's not a real thing. You don't get into it. It's a concept. And that's where it is, and that's where it's going to stay.
Okay, so here are the things that could happen that will really test this proposition. Our friend John Shanzer just said on Twitter that he believes there is a high likelihood of a serious Iranian strike, counterstrike on Israel for its behavior over the last month. We'll see if that's true, but apparently intelligence is showing movement, things going on inside Tehran that suggest trouble. She will have to respond to that. And of course, the great temptation that she faces is saying effectively, well, Israel deserved it if Israel gets hit. In other words, like, we said there should be a ceasefire. We said that they shouldn't do this. And now it's happened. And yes, we'll defend Israel. Israel has a right to defend itself. But, and she'll never say Israel deserves it, but they'll background it. They'll kind of background it a little bit here and there. Whoever it is that's leaking the defense plans of Israel's strike will be perfectly happy to somehow come up with a blaming Israel for. And remember, Iran is the country I believe that Americans like least on the planet Earth, or certainly have over the course of the last 45 years. And so the idea of sort of like giving them some kind of credit, I think is. Remember, Iran, not to go like into, it's not even recent history. When Barack Obama proposed the JCPOA, the Iran deal, 65% of the United States was opposed to it. And he had to create this entire bizarre flipped condition for the Senate to vote 2/3 against the deal for him to withdraw the deal. Which is not the way treaties
didn't
work.
Submit as a treaty, right?
Right. If it had been a treaty, you would have had to have 2/3 of the Senate support it, and therefore it would have gone down to, in fact, 62 senators, I believe, voted against the Iran deal, if I have that number right. not enough to tank it, enough to allow Democratic senators who did not want to be on record as supporting it to get a free shot in while the bill went down. So Americans don't like Iran. Iran may hit Israel. And again, this will be a time of choosing if Iran hits Israel and how Iran hits Israel for the United States' response. And it's a troubling moment because they don't want to respond. Clearly, they will not want to. They'll say, well, we did it back in April or March or whenever it was that they participated in the shooting down of the Iranian response to the assassination of the Iranian IGRC chief in Damascus. But that's one thing. So
the Biden policy is America will help Israel defend itself from attack, but right. America will not help Israel defeat its enemies and restore balance to the Middle East.
Right. Okay, so she's got that coming. Trump went to Valdosta, Georgia yesterday to make an appearance at a site of hurricane damage. She made an appearance at FEMA in Washington. The Biden administration says, and I think this is not an entirely unfair thing for Biden to have said, we don't want to go right smack dab in the middle of where things are the worst because we don't want to interfere with rescue efforts. And when a president arrives, like they have to do a lot of stuff, and so we don't want to interfere. Fine, whatever. Maybe it's nonsense, but it's a defensible position. But she doesn't have to go to Asheville or Boone or one of these, places tragically submerged in water in North Carolina. She could also have gone to Valdosta, Georgia, or somewhere else in Georgia, or somewhere in Tennessee to survey damage. Why didn't she go? I don't understand. I don't get what's going on here. Is she trying to maintain her distance from?
She has no public events today on her schedule, which is weird as well. Maybe she'll show up today at one of the sites.
Maybe I'm missing a bet, but sitting in a room with people on the phone at FEMA looking like she's Jerry Lewis at the telethon with all the phone people in the phone bank behind her, or like at a news radio station or something like that, and saying we're going to, give you everything you need.
Okay, but this is also going again. Look, what did Biden say when he was asked about dealing with the hurricane fallout? He said, I'm in command. I was on the phone for 2 hours. There is a delicate balance she's striking every day with not overshadowing the boss, whether or not he's in charge. And I think that's part of it with this dance with FEMA.
Also, I don't want to be too conceptual about this idea here, but I think that when you bring her into contact with real people, the campaign knows that this is a problem. And if you keep her out there as an image and an idea, which was what that stupid
Air Force One photo was.
Yeah, yes. is supposed to be. That's
blank page.
That's the candidate. That's the campaign. It's not real. If you don't get into real things.
Right. I honestly think that her not going there is basically the same thing as her skipping the Al Smith dinner that we talked about last
That's right.
week.
But the Al Smith dinner, you have to perform. And I know it's a performance to go but wait. She goes to some town, right? Now, granted, by the way, part of the problem here is that with the exception of Asheville, which is literally like a blue dot in a red area, but Asheville is a very liberal city. A lot of these places that have been ravaged are not her territory. Right? And they are sort of Trump land. So they don't know what they'll get. They don't know whether someone will come up to her and say, you should be in jail, and Biden, and what did you, Hunter Biden, and, whatever. Maybe that's what they're afraid of. But kind of all she has to do is go there, say, I'm here to show my support. Just tell me what's happened to you, what happened, that's really sad. My, Phil here on my staff, please go over to him and he'll take down
That's
your
more than she.
information.
I think Abe is right.
Really?
That's more than she can manage. She can do the 3-second TikTok video of her hugging a supporter, and that's all she needs to do. Look at how long she spent at FEMA. She was there for a little bit, and then she instantly left. Wouldn't take questions. I mean, she cannot stay in one place for very long and deal with the unwashed masses. She's not
okay.
comfortable. She's not
Okay.
comfortable doing that.
Abe has been right about the fact that the media are making it possible for her to go along this way. But like I say, if things get hairy in the Middle East, if the flood damage news gets worse, because we don't really know, there's all sorts of things we don't know. We don't know how many people who have not been located survived. They're all I mean, it is apocalyptic what happened, particularly in North Carolina, and I don't think they were prepared. They weren't prepared for this. Not that you can really prepare, but the fact that it's sort of 4 days later and there seem to be thousands of people unaccounted for. This could be really like deeply that cannot be like left to one side politically. And one other interesting thing I want to note about October surprises. The Wall Street Journal had a very, very interesting editorial yesterday about something that I did not see in the news, which is that there was an appellate hearing relating to the fraud case against Trump, the Letitia James case, where he was found liable. The Trump companies were found liable for defrauding their for lying about their financial position, and found guilty, $483 million judgment or something like that. And a 5-judge panel heard some kind of appeal. This is a civil case, so I don't really understand the civil procedure here. And according to the Journal, 3 of the 5 judges said, I don't know. And one said, I don't see any harm. Like, these were 2 counterparties and they got paid. They paid and nobody complained. So there's no harm. And then one said, I don't know. I think that Letitia James, the Attorney General's case, that was out over her skis. Like, she's making a series of claims about fraud that don't stand up. And then the third said, I don't know. The judge made a lot of findings that are making me uncomfortable. So that's 3 out of the 5 judges, each of whom, according to the Journal, brought up a different problem with that fraud hearing. Now, I don't know what the schedule is. These things take a long time. Maybe they will not announce a decision or whatever it is before November 5th. But what if they do? What if it's November 1st and the judges come out with the appeals court throws out the case 4 or 5 days before the election?
Then Trump would be vindicated and he'd get some positive news
right
a few days before the election.
Right. Again, maybe this being a civil case, this could take 6 months and not just that, one conversation in that one courtroom. But that's why she won't be. That's why the skating.
It's always important to
34
remember
days.
that Trump does close in 16 and in 20, even in the midterm elections. He really ramps up his activity. The manic side kicks in, and so this is a critical moment. This last few weeks of the election, and if he's visible and active and in command, and Trump, for all of his weaknesses, but also some of his strengths, that's not a good look for Harris in the final weeks of the campaign. And the polling doesn't help you because you're bombarded by polls every second online, and they all amount to basically the same thing, which is no one knows who's going to win this election. So what matters is what are you doing? And obviously there are other factors. That's the TV presence, which we were talking about with her ads, which is just that bio ad. And I'm sure there's some abortion spots as well. But that what people are still concerned about the economy. People are still concerned about immigration. And people are concerned, even though it shows up in weird ways, with this disordered, chaotic, war-torn world. And then there's finally just the ground game, and that seems to be a pretty decided Harris advantage. But Trump has surprised before.
And early
By the way,
voting, mail-in voting and stuff like that. That's where they have.
Yeah,
the
well,
sort of
apparently
technical-
mail-in voting is down this year.
Yeah,
it
it's
seems like that
surprisingly
may
that
have
they
been
haven't
a
even hit-
pandemic exception.
Yeah,
that it was 2020 and in the
Yeah.
pandemic, and now we're out of the pandemic, so that might not be as huge a factor as it was 4 years ago.
I believe as of today, 1 million people have voted. It's been 2.5 weeks. Remember, the electorate could be as large as 160 million people, which means if you sort of track where that was supposed to be, I'm sure it was supposed to be a lot larger. And now you have, of course, a crisis in 2 crucial states that have early voting, right? That's North Carolina and Georgia, where the ability both to deliver or to send out mail has obviously been horribly compromised. Now, it's way early enough in the electoral cycle for that either to be repaired or for people to simply go to the polls on election day if they really want to vote the way they have for 245 years or whatever. It's like it's not like you have, if without early voting, blah blah blah. But that's right. There does seem to be some alteration in the dynamic here. That yeah. Again, remember, the thing about early voting that has always been a little weird is it's a little like Black Friday shopping, which is you do all this work to get people to buy stuff the day after Thanksgiving and do all that. But it's not like they're not going to buy Christmas presents. You're just trying to get them to shop with you rather than shop somewhere else. And maybe you can have a better cash flow before the end of the year, but you'd still expect those people are going to buy Christmas presents before the 25th of December. It's not like an early vote is 2 votes. There is some weird mystical misunderstanding here that I think a lot of Democrats have gotten to believe that there's magic in early voting.
Maybe in Cook County, but probably not.
Right.
Well, it's
you didn't need
it's
that
a
on early
banking
voting.
thing also. It's a banking
Right.
thing also because it's like, if there is a hurricane, if there is bad
Right.
weather,
That's
and people
right.
don't want to stand in line for hours, even if they keep the polls open. It's
Well,
an
that's
insurance.
right. That's right. I understand. I'm just saying that in the end, it's still 1 vote. So, if you don't do it one way, do it the other. Before there was early voting, Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump by 3 million votes. So pretty much. And, certainly before there was early voting, Barack Obama beat John McCain beat Mitt Romney by 4 million votes. So it's not necessary, for Democrats to have early voting to win. So I don't know. That's just an interesting example. I just think that the world is conspiring to make it more and more difficult for Kamala Harris to be silent. But, you can't argue with the fact that is their strategy. It's clearly their strategy, and it's weird, and it's nonetheless what's happening. Christine Rosen, I believe you told me that in your youth, your father gifted you with fan material relating to the Pete Rose, who passed away yesterday at the age of 83.
Yes, I had actually yesterday was my dad's 83rd birthday. Happy birthday, Dad.
Happy birthday.
And he gave me a Pete Rose glove. I'm a lefty, so it's like a special left-hander's glove, and I still have it. I played with it all through high school and like college intramurals, softball and a little baseball when they'd let me. But it was interesting to me how the assessment of Pete Rose's life and his, he played for the Reds and was denied entry into the Major League Hall of Fame because he gambled. This is the late 80s. He started gambling on baseball. He was a big part of my understanding of sports as when I was young, in part because I didn't even know people bet on sports and that was illegal. Of course, now it's not. So there is some interesting reassessment. But his whole life arc, he was called Charlie Hustle. A lot of people who love baseball hated Pete Rose because he wanted to win so badly, and he was absolutely down and dirty about doing it. I always he was always fun to watch, but his whole arc as a kind of morality tale as a famous athlete is interesting, and I think quite different from the way we treat professional athletes now. But yes, I have a Pete Rose glove. I still have it. I still play with it when my kids will throw around with me.
I think it is preposterous that he's not in the Baseball Hall of Fame. I understand he bet against his own team, and that's terrible. And I understand that everybody.
We don't think he bet against his own. Do we think? Do we have reason to believe? So part of the reason that I think it's preposterous because I don't think that we have seen anything suggesting he bet against his own team. It seems like he just bet on the team and didn't bet on games involving his team when certain pitchers were pitching. Rather than bet against,
he wasn't a booster.
Those days off, but he wasn't. But the thing is that if you look at the rules, the gambling rule about not gambling, it's in a section about misbehavior in baseball and whatever. And the whole section until it gets to the gambling part is very clear. What they're doing is they're trying to get you to not throw games. This is the shoeless Joe Jackson thing, the thrown World Series, the fixed World Series sort of thing. This is the legacy of that, and they have it as the misconduct is the first one is any player or person connected with a club who shall promise to agree to lose or attempt to lose or fail to give his best efforts. So it's true that when they get to the gambling one, it doesn't say you're allowed to bet on your team, but it's very clear that the whole section is really about
throwing the game,
people throwing games. And Pete Rose, from everything we know, we have a lot of information.
Yeah.
Really does seem like he only bet on himself, and I think that should make a difference.
Also, he was like the single most competitive person who ever lived. It's one of the reasons that everybody hated him. Everybody in baseball hated him. He was an unpleasant person. He was an unpleasant person to be managed by. He was an unpleasant person to play against. And there was a kind of ocean of hostility that in a classic, what we would now look at as sort of like a Twitter outrage swarm, kind of hit him at a particular moment when way worse things were going on in baseball, including like drugs, cocaine ravaging, and then of course steroids coming in later. And I'm going to say one more old man yells at cloud thing, because I got into a fight on Twitter about this. So he holds a record that will never be beaten, right? He has the most hits anybody has ever gotten in baseball. You have 4,300, something like that, 4,300 hits. No one will ever approach that again. The nature of the game has changed so much that no one will play that long or have that capacity. Particularly, somebody will not play 22 years who was not like a power hitter, and he wasn't really a power hitter. But he had this record that will never, ever be beaten, like Cy Young's 511 wins, never, ever be beaten. And I get into some fight on Twitter with, baseball nerdo, types who are like, he was the 68th best player who ever lived, according to the WAR, OPS, all these new stats that came in after I was really
rule.
After I stopped being a really crazy baseball fan, and how wins over replacement and this slugging percentage and blah, 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 blah. And I'm sorry, he's one of the 10 greatest players. He holds a record that no one will ever beat. That's what makes somebody like a legend. And the idea that this legend is not in the Hall of Fame, he didn't use performance enhancing drugs. All he was just a really mean, tough, all out, like crazy competitive player who had this unbelievable facility for hitting a ball where another player wasn't for 23 years or however it was that he played in the league. And
he was the rookie of the year in like 63. Yeah. And then he played for.
Yeah,
There's an
I mean,
HBO
but
documentary that's very worth watching if you want to.
anyway, I am.
And the last thing about the Hall of Fame, by the way, is that the Hall of Fame is a separate institution and therefore separate rules. He doesn't have to be banned from the Hall of Fame by virtue of being permanently ineligible from Major League Baseball. The Hall of Fame passed a rule that became known as the Pete Rose rule 2 years after Pete Rose got caught and banished from the game. 2 years after they passed the rule saying anyone permanently ineligible also is ineligible for the Hall of Fame.
Let me just tell you right now, I know a lot of sports writers. I've worked at 3 different newspapers. I knew a lot of sports writers. I like them. They're fun. Having them as moral arbiters of anybody's personal behavior is about, it's
just
like,
look at the NFL.
You know,
I mean, come on.
No, but I'm talking about like the kinds of people who set the rules at the Baseball Hall of Fame, like anybody who sets rules in international sports, like, you know, physician, heal thyself. Are you kidding me? Like, really? He had to die at 83 without being in the Hall of Fame. Like, what is the matter with you people? And you Bill James people, you've ruined baseball. Your stat nonsense has ruined baseball. I say we have one consistent way of judging people throughout the course of baseball history. It's batting average, RBIs, hits, stolen bases, homers. That's how we know whether you were great or bad. And I can't, and you suck the life out of everything. That's what I say. Old man yelling at cloud.
Now it's time for your crazy pills.
That might be crazy pills.
Although I look, I'm a humanities person too, and you know how I feel about math. All of our listeners do, but I will say there is a charm for kids who get into baseball via statistics because there's something fun about.
I got into baseball via statistics,
I know.
But they were better statistics than these.
Okay,
These are lousy
all right.
statistics.
Fair enough.
Right. They were like, did you get a hit? That was the statistic.
Right, as opposed
Instead
to
of like,
if you were in the,
you know,
if you
what
had been in the lineup, if you weren't in the lineup,
Well,
would
they turned it
somebody
into
in
an
your
SAT
position
math
have
problem.
got-
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like not good. Matt is being very quiet because I think he disagrees with me.
No. I think he
you
belongs
agree?
in the Hall of Fame, especially since the gambling industry has eaten up professional
Exactly.
sports.
Yes, thank you.
So it just seems ridiculous that he would be excluded today on the basis of gambling when everyone is involved in sports, is involved somehow in the gambling industry.
Yeah, wait until DraftKings buys naming rights at Cooperstown. It'll be the
Right.
DraftKings.
Of course, Ohtani
Baseball
got
Hall
into
of
some
Fame.
trouble earlier this year when he had to fire his translator
Right.
for taking money
Yes.
to bet on stuff, and
But his
so
translator
you
stole money from him, supposedly.
stole. Yeah.
So I mean, to be fair,
right. He wasn't betting,
but that was the moment.
There's no evidence he was betting.
Right. That was the moment at which I thought, okay, you know what? All of life, like everything, the disappointing nature of the last 25 years or 30 years of American life has now reached its apex, because here we have this like magical player who is doing things that no one's ever done before. And now we really can't have nice things because he's betting on games. Really? Is this really happening?
No,
but he didn't do it.
He didn't do it. And
do it.
he's engaged now, and he has a very cute dog. So,
And that is what's most important.
the Ohtani legend endures.
The Ohtani legend endorsed. Okay, well, we are. So we recommend, the commentary recommends a Shohei Ohtani as the baseball season ends.
And Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame.
And Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame.
Aaron Judge had a better season. Aaron Judge is the MVP. So I think we should at least, if we're going to recommend Ohtani.
Okay, first of all, they're in 2 different leagues, right? They're in 2 different leagues. So Ohtani will be the MVP in the NL. Judge will be the MVP in the AL. He had you're only saying he had a better season because of OPS or whatever, or slugging percentage, and now you are going in the wrong direction.
No,
Ohtani,
he hit more home runs. Look, numbers, real numbers.
He hit 4
larger
more home
numbers.
Runs. I know, and he had way fewer RBIs, and he had a lower batting average. Yes, Judge had a better season, but Ohtani did do this thing. It's so insane. he is such a great player in every possible way that he can't pitch this year. So he's like, okay, I'll steal 55 bases while I hit 55 home runs just for the hell of it.
All I'm saying is to make them the co-recommendation. That's all I
Yeah.
was saying.
Okay, there you go. Tommy and Judge,
Put Aaron Judge
and
in,
Charlie
yeah.
and Charlie Hustle.
Yes.
Okay.
Posthumous Charlie Hustle.
There we go.
in the
Okay,
Hall of
so
Fame.
everybody, we are going to be doing an emergency podcast tonight after the Walz Vance debate. So that would probably be up around midnight Eastern time. If you want to listen and not wait, if you're just so desperate to hear how we feel about it, we'll get it up for you at midnight. Otherwise, you can hear it in the morning because that's the podcast we're going to be doing for Wednesday. And so let me just say, since we are not doing a podcast Wednesday, that Thursday and Friday are the first 2 days of the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah. So we will not be podcasting Thursday and Friday. So this is the last you will hear live of my voice wishing you a very happy New Year. Or maybe I'll say it later, but you will. Anyway, we will not be doing a podcast Thursday and Friday. We'll be back for you on Monday. For Abe, Seth, Matt, and Christine, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.